The wingman's name was Lieutenant Thomas Parker, 21 years old, Boston. They'd gone through training together. On August 14, Parker got separated from the formation during a dogfight over Finchhofen. 2 Zeros got on his tail. Parker tried everything, rolled hard, reversed, tried to scissor. The Zeros stayed with him through every maneuver. Hayes heard Parker on the radio calling for help, heard the panic in his voice, heard him say his airplane wasn't turning fast enough, heard the gunfire, heard Parker scream, then nothing. Hayes didn't sleep that night, neither did most of the squadron. Parker's bed stayed empty, his personal effects got packed up and shipped home. His P-38 was written off as combat loss. The maintenance log noted no mechanical issues. The official cause was pilot error during defensive maneuvering. McKenna had worked on Parker's aircraft the morning he died. Everything was perfect. Engine timing, control surface alignment, cable tension within spec. The airplane was fine, but Parker was dead anyway, and McKenna knew why. That fraction of a second delay in the controls, that tiny bit of slack that the manual said was acceptable, it had killed Parker just like it had killed Morrison and Chin and 14 others. The worst part was the smell. Every morning McKenna worked in the maintenance area. The smell of aviation, fuel and hot metal and hydraulic fluid filled his nose. It was the smell of aircraft preparing for combat. Some of those aircraft would come back, some wouldn't, and McKenna would be there the next morning smelling the same smells, working on more aircraft, watching more pilots walk out to machines that couldn't respond fast enough to keep them alive. On the evening of August 16, Hayes came to the maintenance area, found McKenna working on his assigned P-38. Hayes asked if there was anything McKenna could do to make the airplane roll faster. Anything at all, Hayes said. He didn't care if it was regulation or not, he just wanted a chance. McKenna looked at Hayes, saw the fear, saw the desperation, saw a kid who knew he was going to die if something didn't change. McKenna told Hayes to come back in the morning, he'd see what he could do. McKenna worked alone that night. The maintenance hangar was quiet after 2,300 hours. Most of the crew had gone to sleep. The only sounds were the distant rumble of generators and the buzz of insects against the overhead lights. The air smelled like engine oil and tropical humidity. He pulled the inspection panel off Hayes's P-38 left boom. The metal was still warm from the day's sun. Inside, the aileron control cable ran through a series of pulleys toward the tail section. McKenna grabbed the cable with both hands and pulled, felt the slack, maybe 3/8 of an inch of play before the tension caught. His hands were covered in grease and his fingers ached from a full day of maintenance work, but he could feel that slack clearly. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong. The piano wire came from a salvaged P-38 that had ground looped 2 weeks earlier. The aircraft was scrap, but McKenna had pulled useful parts before it went to the depot, including a 6 inches piece of high-tensile piano wire from the rudder trim system. He'd kept it in his tool bag without really knowing why. Now he knew. He sat on the hangar floor with the wire and a pair of pliers, bent it into a Z shape. The wire was stiff, fought back against the pliers. His hand slipped twice, cut his thumb on the second try. The blood made the wire slippery. He wiped it on his coveralls and kept working. Took him 8 minutes to get the bend right. The Z shape would act as an inline tensioner, would add just enough preload to the cable to eliminate the slack. Installing it was harder. The space inside the boom was tight. McKenna had to work with one hand while holding a flashlight with the other. The beam kept moving. Shadows jumped across the cable system. His shoulder wedged against the boom structure. The metal edge cut into his arm. He could feel sweat running down his back despite the night air. He disconnected the cable at the pulley junction. His fingers fumbled with the clevis pin. Dropped it. Heard it bounce somewhere in the boom. Spent 5 minutes feeling around in the dark until he found it. The whole time his heart was pounding. If the engineering officer found him doing unauthorized modifications to a flight control system, he'd face a court-martial, possibly a dishonorable discharge, maybe prison time. But Hayes was going to die if McKenna didn't do something. He inserted the piano wire tensioner between the cable end and the pulley, reconnected the cable. The fit was tight. He had to force the clevis pin through. When it finally seated, he tested the tension by hand, pulled on the cable. No slack. The control surface moved immediately. Perfect. McKenna replaced the inspection panel, cleaned up his tools, wiped the blood off the wire in his hands, walked out of the hangar at 0115. The tropical night was humid and still. Somewhere in the distance, he heard aircraft engines, Japanese night raiders, probably. The sound made his stomach clench. He just modified a flight control system without authorization, used a non-standard part, violated at least a dozen regulations. If the modification failed during flight, Hayes would crash and McKenna would be responsible. But if it worked, Hayes might live. McKenna went to his bunk, didn't sleep, watched the ceiling until dawn. At 6:30, he walked to the flight line, watched the crew fuel and arm Hayes's aircraft, watched Hayes walk out for his pre-flight briefing, watched him climb into the cockpit. At 0742, Hayes took off. McKenna stood on the flight line and watched the P-38 climb into the morning sky. Watched it join formation with 16 other aircraft. Watched them head northwest toward Japanese airspace. And then all he could do was wait. The engagement started at 0814. Hayes's flight of 4 P-38s intercepted 900 at 13,000 foot over the Huan Gulf. The morning sun was behind them. Perfect setup for a diving attack. Hayes was flying number 3 position. His element leader called out the bounce. They rolled in. Hayes picked a 0 at the back of the formation. Dove from altitude. Built speed to 380 miles per hour. The 0 grew larger in his gun sight. Hayes could see the painted rising sun on the fuselage, could see the pilot's head in the canopy. He pressed the trigger. The 450 caliber machine guns in single 20mm cannon hammered. Tracers reached out. Most missed. A few hits sparked off the 0's wing. Not enough. The 0 snap rolled right in Dove. Hayes rolled to follow. That's when he felt it. The airplane responded instantly. No delay, no lag. The stick moved and the aircraft rolled immediately. Hayes had never felt his P-38 move like that. It was like the airplane had been waiting for his command and executed it the moment he gave it. He rolled 90 degrees in what felt like half the normal time. Got his nose down. The 0 was right there in his sight picture. He fired again. 3 SE's second burst. The rounds walked up the 0's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The 0's engine exploded. Pieces flew off. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell toward the jungle below, trailing black smoke. Hayes's first kill, but there was no time to celebrate. His wingman called out 0's diving from above. Hayes looked up, saw 3 of them coming down in a shallow dive, coming fast. They'd seen him shoot down their friend. Now they wanted revenge. Hayes shoved the throttles forward, started to climb, but the 0's were faster in the dive. They'd be on him in seconds. His only option was to reverse and fight. Every instinct screamed at him to keep climbing, keep running. That was the doctrine. But doctrine meant dying today. He rolled hard left, pulled. The P-38 snapped around like nothing he'd ever experienced. The nose came through the horizon. He saw the lead 0. It was turning to follow him, but hadn't expected Hayes to reverse that fast. The 0 was in a bad position. Exposed. Hayes pulled lead, fired, hit the 0 in the left wing route. The wing folded. The 0 tumbled. 2 kills in 30 seconds. The other 2 0's tried to scissor with him, alternating turns to force an overshoot. Hayes stayed with them. Every time they reversed direction, his P-38 snapped into the turn instantly. No delay, no fighting the controls. The airplane did exactly what he wanted the moment he wanted it. It was like flying a different aircraft, like someone had removed invisible weights from the control system. 1-0 made a mistake, reversed too hard, bled too much speed. Hayes got inside his turn. Close range, maybe 200 feet. He fired, couldn't miss. The 0 came apart. Pieces of aircraft fell past Hayes's canopy. He felt the P-38 shudder as debris hit his right boom. 3 kills. The 4th 0 ran. Hayes didn't chase. He was low on fuel and ammunition. He climbed back to altitude. Reformed with what was left of his flight, they headed home. The entire engagement lasted 7 minutes. When Hayes landed at Doadura at 0903, McKenna was waiting on the flight line. Hayes shut down the engines, climbed out of the cockpit. His hands were shaking. His flight suit was soaked with sweat. He walked straight to McKenna. Hayes said 2 words. It worked. What neither of them realized was that 6 other pilots had watched Hayes's engagement from altitude. Captain Frank Mitchell saw the entire fight from 15,000 feet. Mitchell was a flight leader in the 475th Fighter Group. He'd been watching Hayes's element engage the Zeros below when he noticed something unusual. Hayes's P-38 was rolling faster than any Lightning Mitchell had ever seen. The aircraft snapped through maneuvers like it weighed half what it should. Mitchell knew every pilot in the theater knew their skill levels. Hayes was good, but not that good. Something was different about his airplane. After landing, Mitchell found Hayes in the debriefing room. Hayes was still amped up on adrenaline, hands shaking as he filled out the combat report. 3 confirmed kills. Mitchell asked him what was different. Hayes said he didn't know. His airplane just responded better today, faster. Mitchell asked if maintenance had done anything to the aircraft. Hayes said he should talk to Technical Sergeant McKenna. Mitchell found McKenna in the maintenance area 2 hours later. McKenna was working on a different P-38. His hands were black with grease. His coveralls were stained with hydraulic fluid. Mitchell asked him directly, "What did you do to Hayes's airplane?" McKenna looked at him for a long moment, then told him, "The piano wire tensioner, the cable modification, the unauthorized change to the flight control system." Mitchell listened without interrupting. When McKenna finished, Mitchell asked if he could do the same modification to Mitchell's aircraft. McKenna said yes, but Mitchell had to understand the risks. The modification wasn't approved, wasn't tested. If something went wrong, both of them would face charges. Mitchell said he didn't care. He'd lost 4 pilots in his flight in the past month, all caught in turning fights they couldn't escape. If there was something that could help them survive, he wanted it. Regulations could wait. That evening, McKenna modified Mitchell's P-38. Same piano wire tensioner, same installation method. Mitchell flew it the next morning, came back raving about the improvement. The airplane rolled like a fighter instead of a truck, he told his wingman. The wingman told McKenna he wanted the modification, too. By August 20th, McKenna had modified 9 aircraft. Word spread through the squadron. Pilots started asking their crew chiefs if they'd heard about the cable modification. Some crew chiefs refused, said it was against regulations. Others were willing to try. McKenna showed them how. Cut the piano wire, bend it into a Z-shape, install it as an inline tensioner, takes 8 minutes, changes everything. The modifications spread pilot to pilot and mechanic to mechanic. No official documentation, no engineering approval, just whispered conversations in the ready room and maintenance area. Hayes shot down 2 more Zeros on August 22 using the modified controls. Mitchell got 3 on August 25. Other pilots started coming back from missions with kills. The statistics were impossible to ignore. Lieutenant James Watkins was a crew chief with the 49th Fighter Group stationed at Gussap. He heard about the modification from a pilot who transferred from WWII. Watkins was skeptical, but he tried it on 1 aircraft. The pilot came back from the next mission with his first kill after 8 weeks of combat. Watkins modified 4 more aircraft. Other crew chiefs in the 49th started doing it too. By early September, maybe 40 P-38s in New Guinea had the modification. The engineering officer at WWII noticed something was different, but couldn't figure out what. Control cable tensions checked out during inspections because the crew chiefs removed the tensioners before inspections and reinstalled them afterward. The pilots knew, the mechanics knew, nobody told the officers. The kill ratio started shifting. In July, American pilots in the Southwest Pacific lost 2 P-38s for every Zero destroyed. In August, it was 1.3 to 1. By September, it was nearly even. Something had changed, but officially, nobody knew what. Then the Japanese noticed. Japanese fighter pilots first reported the change in late August. Flight reports from the 11th Airfleet mentioned that American P-38s were maneuvering more aggressively, rolling faster into turns, reversing direction more quickly. The reports noted that tactics which had worked reliably for months were suddenly failing. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai was one of Japan's top aces. 64 Confirmed kills. He'd been fighting American pilots since Pearl Harbor. On September 3, 1943, Sakai engaged a P-38 over WWII. He used his standard tactic, drew the American into a turning fight, waited for the P-38 to begin its roll, then snapped his turn back the opposite direction to get inside the American's turning radius, except the P-38 reversed with him. Sakai had executed this maneuver dozens of times. He knew exactly how long it took a P-38 to roll, knew the timing perfectly, but this P-38 rolled faster than it should have. Sakai barely avoided a head-on collision. The American got guns on him. Sakai had to dive away. He returned to base confused and frustrated. Other experienced Japanese pilots reported similar encounters. The Americans weren't flying differently. They were still using the same tactics, but their aircraft were responding faster. Fractionally, but enough to matter, enough to disrupt the timing that Japanese pilots had learned to exploit. Japanese intelligence tried to determine what had changed. They examined wreckage from downed P-38s, found no obvious modifications. The aircraft looked identical to the ones they'd been fighting for months. The engines were the same. The armament was the same. Nothing visible had changed. What the Japanese didn't know was that the change was hidden inside the boom, a 6-inch piece of piano wire that looked like original equipment. Even if they'd found it, they might not have understood its purpose. It wasn't a new weapon system, wasn't a new engine. Just a minor modification to control cable tension. But that minor modification was killing their pilots. By mid-September, Japanese pilots were losing aircraft to P-38s at rates they hadn't seen since early in the war. The psychological impact was significant. For 2 years, zero pilots had owned the sky in turning fights. They knew they could outmaneuver anything the Americans flew. That confidence was breaking down. Pilots who used to press attacks were becoming cautious, hesitant. They weren't sure anymore if their tactics would work. The Japanese tried to adapt. Some pilots stopped trying to get into turning fights with P-38s, used hit-and-run tactics instead, but that meant giving up their main advantage. The zero strength was maneuverability. Fighting like a P-38 meant fighting on American terms, and the P-38 was faster, more heavily armed, and could take more damage. Other pilots tried to compensate by being more aggressive, closing to shorter range before firing, taking more risks, but aggression without the ability to outturn the enemy just meant dying faster. Several experienced Japanese pilots were killed in September trying tactics that had worked perfectly in July. The fundamental problem for Japanese pilots was that they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see. They knew something had changed, but they didn't know what, and they couldn't figure out how to counter it. You can't develop tactics against a modification you don't know exists. By the end of September, the 11th Air Fleet had lost 38 fighters in combat with P-38s. American losses in the same period were 22 aircraft. The ratio had reversed. For the first time in the Pacific War, P-38s were killing zeros at a better than 1:1 rate. The Japanese command instructed pilots to avoid engaging P-38s unless they had a substantial numerical advantage. That order marked a turning point. The zero had shifted from predator to prey, and it all hinged on a piece of piano wire that no one was authorized to install. The modification never became official during the war. The Army Air Force's Engineering Command discovered it in October 1943, when a maintenance inspector at Dobodura noticed inconsistent cable tension readings. He traced the irregularities to the piano wire tensioners, filed a report, and sent it up the chain of command. The report lingered on desks for 3 weeks while officers debated what to do. The modification violated regulations, but it worked. Fighter squadrons using it saw noticeably higher kill ratios. Pilots were surviving. The question wasn't whether it helped, the question was whether to punish the mechanics who had installed it without authorization or quietly approve it after the fact. In November, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea to evaluate the modification. They tested it, measured cable tensions, calculated stress loads, and conducted flight trials. Their conclusion: the modification was both safe and effective. It should have been included in the original design. Lockheed integrated a similar tensioning system into the P-38J model that entered production in December 1943, but McKenna never received formal recognition. No commendation, no medal, no mention in any report. Official Lockheed documentation credited the improvement to engineering analysis. McKenna's name was absent. Hayes survived the war. He flew 63 combat missions, shot down 11 Japanese aircraft, returned to Iowa in 1945, married his high school sweetheart, had 4 children, and worked as a crop duster for 37 years. He never forgot what McKenna had done. Every year on August 17, Hayes called McKenna to thank him for saving his life. Mitchell also survived, becoming a squadron commander, leading his unit through the Philippines campaign, and shooting down 16 aircraft. After the war, he remained in the Air Force, retiring as a colonel in 1963. He recounted McKenna's modification to every young maintenance officer under his supervision, emphasizing that sometimes the best solutions come from enlisted mechanics who notice problems engineers overlook. McKenna remained in the Army Air Forces until 1946, returned to California, resumed working on cars, and opened his own garage in Long Beach in 1948. He worked on engines for 42 years, rarely discussing the war. When asked, he would simply say he was a mechanic, fixed airplanes, that's all. In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications found references to the piano wire tensioner in New Guinea maintenance logs. The historian tracked down McKenna through veteran registries. By then, McKenna was 73, still working part-time in his garage. The historian asked about the modification. McKenna confirmed it, insisting it wasn't anything extraordinary, just something that needed doing. The historian estimated that the modification may have saved between 80 and 100 American pilots' lives, based on improved survival rates in squadrons that used it. McKenna never kept count. He simply remembered the pilots who came back: Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, and the others. That was enough. James McKenna died in 2006 at the age of 88. He was buried in Pacific View Memorial Park in California. His obituary mentioned his World War II service as an aircraft mechanic but made no reference to the piano wire tensioner, to the fact that he had changed how American fighters flew, or that he had broken regulations to save lives. His Long Beach garage still exists, under new ownership, but in the back office hangs a faded photograph, a young mechanic in coveralls standing next to a P-38 Lightning. The date on the back reads August 1943, New Guinea. That is how innovation truly happens in war, not through official channels or engineering committees, but through sergeants and mechanics who spot problems, devise solutions, and act without waiting for permission to save lives. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten tales from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each story matters. Each deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community stretches from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You are part of something special here. Thank you for watching and for helping keep these stories alive.